We've heard that masturbation is entirely normal, but to what extent? How many times a day can you do it without being considered an addict? What happens if you can't stop? Let's address these questions and why you should stop today with this act that seems normal but hides a trap for your life. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize for the exaggerated cover, but I needed to grab your attention on this century's plight that weakens and harms all our youth and adults, leaving us without willpower. In this video, you'll understand what happens with our brains scientifically and philosophically, and what Stoicism has to teach us about this vice and how it harms our thoughts. Remember to subscribe to our channel and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's start. Modern medicine is quite clear in saying that masturbation is entirely normal, not only in humans but also observed in dogs and other mammals. However, this view of normal masturbation has not always been the case. In the past, masturbation was thought to be immoral, especially in men, because the unproductive production of semen prevented people from reproducing. In the case of women, it was thought that masturbation could distance them from men by finding pleasure by themselves and without help. To this moral burden was added a physical one. It started to be said that masturbation caused diseases, so it was not advisable to practice it ever. But let's return to the present. What do we know about masturbation, especially for men who suffer from insomnia? It is known to induce sleep. The French Institute of Health and Medical Research concluded that men's brains deactivate sexual desire after orgasm. The cerebral cortex, the area responsible for conscious thought, goes into rest once the man reaches climax, and this, in addition to nullifying the desire to continue having sexual relations, facilitates sleep. That's why many men fall asleep after sexual activity. But what's the problem then? What's wrong? Well, hidden in one of its benefits is a trap. And if you frequent this channel, you'll see what I'm talking about. Masturbation releases dopamine in your brain. This hormone is responsible for making us feel better, obtaining calm, relief, stress reduction, and a sense of reward. This is triggered by dopamine and is so pleasurable that some people become addicted. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders incorporated a new disorder in 2017 called hypersexuality disorder. This typifies excessive masturbation under the category of an obsessive-compulsive disorder, that is, another vice that leads to mental and also familial destruction. In many cases, you won't be able to control yourself, becoming a slave to yourself and a victim of lack of control, thus seeking relations with prostitutes, sex with multiple people, and, as we saw in a previous video, the excessive consumption of pornography. These are ways a dopamine-saturated brain finds to obtain pleasure. Pay attention. The addiction to masturbation stems from chemicals released in the brain, and as our brain adapts to the release of these, it feels the need to continually find the cause that generated the stimulation. Your brain will start to demand more and more dopamine to achieve the same pleasure it had the first time, making you always have to look for ways to masturbate again. This reaches an exaggerated point when your brain realizes that the dopamine release is excessive and begins to block the receptors in an attempt to stop you. As a result, the person performs the act of pleasure, in this case, masturbation, but gets nothing out of it, which frustrates them more than they already were. Excessively masturbating to satisfy that hunger for pleasure is exactly the same as what a smoker who never stops, someone who eats chocolate until vomiting, or even an alcoholic does. At this moment, you might be wondering, but what does Stoicism have to do with this? The Stoics, including Zeno of Citium, Marcus Aurelius, and Panaetios of Rhodes, masters of self-control and wisdom, approached the vision of pleasure and lust from a unique perspective. From the words of Epictetus to the intimate thoughts of Seneca, they explored the depths of human passions, a legacy that still captivates us. For the Stoics, masturbation was not just a search for carnal satisfaction but an opportunity to explore the limits of the body and the mind. They saw it as an exercise in self-knowledge and a path to true freedom. In their philosophy, mastery over worldly passions and pleasures was a conquest that elevated the human spirit. Epictetus stated that it is not nights of pleasure but self-control that distinguishes a good man. In this context, The ability to enjoy pleasure by understanding and containing them makes the difference in someone who has reached a higher level of self-awareness. Instead of being slaves to our desires, we must be their masters, as Seneca reminds us with his philosophical perspective. The Stoic reflection on masturbation is not simply about repression but about deep understanding and self-mastery. This translates into the ability to direct our emotions towards a conscious journey of self-exploration. It is not solely about momentary satisfaction but about understanding, accepting, and embracing our deepest inclinations. From the Stoic perspective, every action has consequences not only for ourselves but also for the natural order of the universe. When we give in to our most intense desires, such as in the case of uncontrolled masturbation, we lose that harmonious connection with nature so esteemed by the Stoics, becoming prisoners of our desires and distancing ourselves from true inner serenity. Compulsive masturbation can trigger an emotional whirlwind within our being, where guilt, shame, and dissatisfaction become constant companions. The Stoics teach us to control our intense emotions through introspection and self-regulation. By consciously facing our emotions, we learn to manage them in a healthy and constructive manner. However, the Stoics encourage us to find inner peace within ourselves. True satisfaction lies in our self-mastery and our ability to find joy in the simple and virtuous. Allow me to share a personal, inspiring story. I know someone who used to struggle with compulsive masturbation, seeking momentary refuge in pleasure but facing an emotional storm after each act. After immersing themselves in Stoic teachings and practicing self-control and self-regulation, this person experienced profound transformation. They learned to confront their desires and emotions consciously, finding true joy in self-control. Now, they live a life of inner peace and authenticity, free from the slavery of momentary desires. True satisfaction comes from living in accordance with our deepest principles and values. When we give in to ephemeral desires, we lose sight of what we truly value in life. Compulsive masturbation can distance us from our most noble purposes and from the true happiness found in virtue and inner peace. By practicing meditation and mindfulness, we can promote the mental serenity necessary to resist temptations and face our emotions healthily. This compulsion becomes an obstacle to mental serenity, dragging us into regrets and distancing us from the peaceful peace found in self-control and moderation.